Yeah, so I was working as a trader 2008 until 2014. And obviously that was in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. And I was an interest rates trader. So I guess some people may be too young to remember now, but so all of the interest rates went very quickly to zero in 2008 in basically all of the Western world. And my job then became to basically bet when will the interest rates go back up, which is kind of a proxy bet for when will the economy recover. And everybody thought that rates would go up very quickly because they thought there would be like a very strong economic stimulus effect from the low rates and from governments were spending tons of money as well. But 2009, no recovery, 2010, no recovery, 2011, no recovery. And I studied economics at the London School of Economics when I was a teenager. And I knew, well, I thought just like everybody else, there should be a recovery, and I knew the theory. And I tried to understand why we're not getting this economic recovery. And I thought about it a lot, and if you want, we can talk about it more. But I basically came to the conclusion that what we had was basically a structural economic problem of growing wealth inequality. Wealth was being lost by the working class, the middle class, governments. They were losing their wealth, and that wealth was being kind of sucked up by the very rich. Ordinary families were getting squeezed out. And I could see that would just get worse over time. So I started to bet very aggressively that basically there would never be an economic recovery, that rates would stay zero for the long term, and those bets were like really successful. In 2011, I became Citibank's most profitable trader in the world, based off of these like really pessimistic bets, basically. So yeah, so it's a crazy thing to experience because obviously, everyone in the bank and everyone around me thought that was like kind of really good because my bets were good and I was making money for the bank and I was making money for me and I got paid a lot of money. But yeah, I worked there for another couple of years, but I just became more and more convinced that the economy was going to get worse and worse, and I'd made a lot of money, so I didn't need to work for money anymore. And I thought it was the right thing to do, basically. I think I have a good understanding of what's happening in the economy. I think it's going to get worse unless we take action on this growing inequality. And I've been thinking that ever since 2011, really. So I tried to quit first in 2012, but I wasn't able to finally get out until 2014. And yeah, for the last 11 years, coming up to 11 years now, I've been trying to figure out ways how we can stop this rapid growth in inequality, how we can stop this fall in living standards. Getting a job as a trader at one of the biggest banks is, that's one of the hardest jobs to get.
It's difficult.
Yeah, so you're in there with the best guys from the best universities. And by 2011, I'd been there nearly 3 years, full time. And I started to see, there are smart guys on these trading floors and at these universities. But the truth is, if I'm totally honest, most of the kids who get into these elite universities nowadays they're not that smart. They're there because they're from rich families. Yeah, that's the way that it is. And then when you get into the top jobs, it's basically the same. There are definitely smart guys in trading.
Yeah, of course.
But the majority of these guys, they're not crazy smart. They're just there because they're from rich families. And it's a little bit blind leading the blind. They're all kind of looking around at each other. Nobody's really figuring it out. So by the time I got to early 2011, I started to recognize that really most guys here don't know what's going on. And you could already see, they'd been so wrong in their predictions for quite a long time by then. So I think it was clear that something was missing. And I was there from one of the best universities in the world, economics universities, doing one of the top jobs in the world. Like, why not me? I was in as good a position as anybody to be the guy that figures it out. And I think in a lot of ways I was in a better position because almost everyone then and now really who gets a job as a top trader is from a rich background. I was able to go back to where I grew up and speak to ordinary people and understand, like, well, why aren't you spending more money?
Because I don't have any.
Yeah, but then what you could see, I could see that loss of wealth from the middle class, because I could see, like in 2011 when I was looking at it, I could see, my dad was quite poor. He was quite low income, and my mum only worked for a few years, but they owned their own house.
Yeah,
and when I looked at my friends' families, a lot of them were in that kind of situation. Their parents were not really rich, but they owned property.
Had a house. Yeah.
And in my generation, you have like kids with degrees who can never own property, and then you can see that these families are losing their wealth. And I think that the big giveaway, which I think,
and it's not one, it's like it's all.
Yeah, everyone. You're like the whole middle class is losing its wealth, and then 2011, which is when I put this bet on, that was the year of the European sovereign debt crisis, and that's when we realised, well, the Western governments are also losing their wealth, and I think really this is the big giveaway, which is if the Western middle class is losing its wealth, the Western working class is losing its wealth, and Western governments are losing their wealth, this is a problem of inequality, because the West as a whole is not losing its wealth. These houses have not disappeared.
No.
So what you were seeing is a change in the internal distribution of wealth.
Yeah.
And what I immediately realized was, well, if the middle class cannot protect their wealth when they own their own home, they definitely can't when they don't own their own home.
No.
And then you realize immediately this will worsen. And this will worsen at an accelerating rate, and the middle class and the working class will
was it so clear for you at that point?
It was more of an intuitive understanding.
Okay.
Obviously now I've spent years and years talking this through and trying to figure out ways to explain it clearly. I've always been quite an intuitive thinker. Like when I was at university doing maths, I'll just kind of look at the question, and then you'll just get the answer, and you know when you really know it. And it was that kind of knowledge, but it was coming from that. You were like, well, if the middle class is being crushed, the working class is being crushed, the government is being crushed, the rich are accumulating wealth at an unbelievable rate, well, you don't need to look far into the future to be like, well, we will lose entirely the middle class. And then you kind of know. And that people weren't talking about, people still aren't really speaking about that. When I decided to go public was at the beginning of COVID, we knew that governments were going to give out an enormous amount of money. And
once again,
for me, someone whose background is basically understanding the importance of inequality and distribution, all I wanted to know was who's getting that money, and nobody was speaking about it. And I think this,
you give it to the rich.
This is one of the most amazing things I've ever seen, was how little, like really, honestly, basically zero discussion there was of who will end up with this money, how will it change the distribution, how will that affect the quality of life, how will that affect the economy. There was just no discussion. The amount of money given out so far, I don't know the number for Denmark, but in the UK it's over £1 trillion. In the US it's over $13 trillion. These enormous amounts of money given out, and no discussion over where the money ended up. It's crazy.
But we're feeling that right now. When they come here and buy property.
That's why I started my YouTube channel. I started my YouTube channel in June 2020, and basically saying this is going to totally dominate the economy for the next probably 20 years.
They also added, I think, was it 25% of the world economy in 1 year or something? They just added that. And again, as you say, who got that money?
No discussion. It's honestly, it's one of the most amazing things I've ever seen, and I think it's a phenomenal failure of our economists.
And insanely well played for a few people, right?
Well, I mean, this is the problem at the end of the day, like, almost all the rich and powerful people benefited from that. So
they did, and we got 500 new billionaires.
So in whose interest is it to put their hand up and say this is wrong? Because it's the people who are getting screwed over are the public.
But when they raise their hand, nobody listens.
The public are not like, you can't expect them to be economic experts. We need to have economists protecting the public. But you look at the government. At the time, we had very wealthy politicians who they themselves benefit from it. So I mean, this is why I decided to make the shift to YouTube, which is very much speaking to the public, because I saw systems where all of the people who are supposed to be protecting the public are basically benefiting from the destruction of the public. So I had to turn around to the public and say, listen, I know you think It's not your job to do this. I know you think it's the politician's job to do this, but they're not doing it. So it has to fall upon you basically to protect yourselves. And that's why I decided to do a YouTube channel which speaks directly to the public. They can influence the media. They literally own newspapers. They own news channels. They own think tanks. They influence politicians. They fund politicians. They lobby politicians. These guys have a lot of power and influence that they will use to prevent the tax system from taxing them more. And that means that even if I were to say become Prime Minister or become Chancellor, if I was to try to fix the tax system, if I didn't have that public support, huge sections of the press would attack me unbelievably aggressively. I mean, it's happening even now. I'm already getting quite aggressively attacked by sections of the press. And, you know, they would try to convince the people that it would be a disaster, and they would try to turn the people against it. They would also try to lobby the politicians to put loopholes in the taxes. And if I didn't have the public support to push back against that, I won't be able to fight that. I won't be able to get the taxes changed, and I won't be able to get the implementation without loopholes, without the public support. How else do we do it? Because the rich are going to fight it. If the public are not willing to fight their side, then we won't get it. I don't think we have. I can't see any way of this winning without that. Even if I was Prime Minister, if the public support wasn't there, I'd be kicked out within weeks, and it would be impossible for me to get the implementation adequate without public support, I think. The first thing to say is, we all have different levels of power, we all have different levels of access. I've got quite a big YouTube channel now, so obviously I can reach a lot of people. And I think that brings with it pressure and responsibility, and most people don't have that level of reach. But we all do have some level of reach, right? So that might be obviously you in the work you're doing now. You're coming here, you're filming this video. That is some contribution. Some other people, they might be in government, or they might have access to government, or they might be an academic economist. An academic economist might be able to do work, write papers that support these things, or you might be in the civil service, or you might be an influencer, or you might be a journalist. All of these people have some power they can use. But really, I think what's more important is to talk to the people that aren't in any of these positions of power, because that's most people. And I think what I would like ordinary people to do is don't drive yourself mad, because we're not going to win this tomorrow. We're not going to win this next year. This is going to be a long-term battle. Just build these arguments in the spaces that you can, which means, so what I want to do with my YouTube is a space where you can go, you might have never studied economics before, and you can develop a bit of understanding of what's happening. And then you can share, I always say at the end of my videos, tell your mum, so you can share it with your mum, or you can share it with your brother or your sister or your colleagues at work, the guys you play football with, the guys you go to church with, whatever you do. Like, I always say, if everybody wins one person, then we win everybody, So it's just, don't be a dick, I think don't be aggressive, things are becoming factional, people are becoming scared. Build your understanding and spread it. The media access is a big part of it. I'm more familiar with the work that we've been doing in the UK, but yeah, they do great work, campaigning, telling people, look, we're not going to leave if you raise the taxes. Just getting it, I always say, the way something goes from being like an outrageous idea to being common sense is just lots of people saying it again and again. And it's not enough, just me. We need more voices. And yeah, the voices that the people here are doing, the people that your group are doing, yeah, that builds the story, Obviously, the other thing which millionaires can do is fund this kind of work. I'm not looking for funding personally,
no.
But one thing I've found in the time I've been doing this work is, like, there are a lot of organisations that find it easier to get funding for climate issues, identity issues, which are important issues. They seem to find it a lot easier to get funding than the guys who are saying tax the rich, and that's because the funding comes from rich people. We're funded by our Patreon, and we're really grateful to the people who fund the Patreon, and we're not looking to expand aggressively. But more funding on tax issues, inequality issues would also help. You know, what inspires me more than anything else is when I see ordinary people who are maybe more at the sharp end of this economic problem, trying to do something to make the situation better. So I went in, it was years ago now, a few years ago, I got sent up to North Yorkshire, which is the constituency for Rishi Sunak, who was our Prime Minister, and at the time he was Chancellor. And they wanted me to do a piece talking to users of a food bank about how they felt at having Britain's richest ever MP. And it just so happened that weekend was the weekend that Russia invaded Ukraine. And then when I went to that food bank, it wasn't being used as a food bank, it was being used as like a donation center to like packing like food and like warm clothes into boxes, and they're going to drive it to Ukraine. And it kind of ruined my story in a way, because it wasn't being used as a food bank. But there was nothing to do, I just had to like pack stuff into boxes like everybody else. And I got talking to the other people that are like packing the boxes, and I asked them like, how did you find out about like, this was going to be happening today? And then somebody said, oh, well, I normally, this is my food bank, I come here, this is where I come to get my food. And I asked, I asked around, and you realize most of the people there were the users of the food bank. So these are people who struggle in normal times just to be able to have enough food to feed their families. And yet, when you have this disaster thousands of miles away, the first thing they think to do is, I'm going to go back to the food bank and I'm going to try to help these people thousands of miles away. And I think it's moments like that motivate me to try and help, because obviously I'm a relatively wealthy person. I don't have to worry about using food banks. But when you see that the poorest people in the country, and it's not just this country, are so willing to help others even when they have very little themselves, that motivates me to try and support others as well. I mean, the growth in my channel has just been unbelievably quick, unbelievably quick. The beginning of last year, I don't think we even had 100,000 subscribers at the beginning of last year on YouTube, and now we've got 1.2 million. It was 500,000 at the beginning of this year, so it's growing crazy quick. The Instagram is coming up to 1 million. The public support and recognition for me and the work that I do in this country is just so big and growing so quickly. And I think that shows that there's public demand for it. There's public appetite for these kinds of ideas. I think it's just a job of people like us to communicate better, basically, and to build the kind of platforms that make it clear to people what's happening in a way that's accessible and welcoming and well explained. So, what I would really hope is that other people in this country, around the world, are seeing what I'm doing, are seeing the popularity of it, seeing the growth of it, and start doing this same sort of thing. And start being, why can't we have somebody doing what he's doing in this country? Maybe I can be that person. Maybe we can build that person. And I would love to see, 2-3 years down the line, channels like mine growing up, popping up, becoming really popular, in the US, in Denmark, in Europe, in Australia, all across the world. What I would like is to see, people using what I'm doing as kind of proof of concept. Because, if there were 10, 20 more people doing what I'm doing, having the same kind of impact, having the same kind of popularity, we would have a lot of power to start pressuring politicians all over the world. And people always ask me, is it possible just the UK by itself? And I always say, why does it have to be just the UK by itself? These same economic problems that we're having here, worsening the economy, hard to afford a house, hard to get a decent job, hard to support a family, hard to get financial security, they're happening everywhere. You're coming here from Denmark, which is, one of the world's stronger economies, but I'm sure you're seeing the same things happening.
I've seen the same similar patterns, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so Yeah, the
sort of like all over the EU.
Yeah, it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
All in the Western world.
I get people messaging me from Australia, from Sweden, from countries which are considered to be very strong economies. And I lived in Japan. These same things are happening everywhere. So I'm just hoping that people are watching and seeing what I'm doing and are going to try to build similar things. If you have low inequality in society, then at the end of the day, your politicians are part of society.
Yes.
But when you have very high inequality in society, then you have this situation where, that class, which can include the politicians,
the ruling class,
they can benefit when the rest of us don't benefit. And I think
that's also something we see in Denmark as well, right?
Yeah. What can happen is you can have this elite class that can pull away from the rest, and they can control the economists, and they can control the politicians, and they can incorporate the economists and politicians, and they can start to pull away. I think it's really, really damaging and dangerous to a society and to a democracy. You can't allow the creation of these separate elites within your country that have the ability to control all of the positions of power and just suck the lifeblood.
But some are still also arguing that we don't have democracy anymore, like we just have the view of it.
Well, I mean, at least in your country you have proportional representation. Yeah. I'm not saying that democracy is perfect in Europe, but I mean, in this country, you basically have two political parties, especially in the US. It's impossible to dislodge those two parties, and then all the rich have to do is control two parties, which is a very relatively small number of people.
Yeah, and they also talked right now again. It's been so obvious that Trump's billionaire cabinet at the inauguration, right? You see them sitting front row, right?
Yeah, and they control the newspapers, they control the politicians,
the social media, the companies, everything.
When you systemically weaken the middle class over a long period of time, and that wealth transfers over to the very rich, you very often have problems of low spending and low consumption, because the rich they don't spend a lot as a proportion of their income, as a proportion of their wealth, whereas ordinary people, middle class people, working class people spend a lot. So as you squeeze that wealth away from the middle class towards the very rich, you have these problems of low consumption, which is what we have, which causes problems for businesses. And then you end up basically forcing governments to step in, and then governments have to spend. But then eventually what you've seen, and what we're increasingly seeing in Europe, and especially the UK, is then the government loses its wealth, and the government ends up in very high levels of debt. Economists do not look at the distribution. The vast majority of economists have almost no interest and spend almost no time considering the wealth distribution.
So where the money goes.
Yeah, and the narrative at the time, if you look at the beginning of COVID, the narrative was that this money is going to furloughed workers. But the only reason it was going to furloughed workers is because they were not getting paid. So we know the money went essentially through furloughed workers, because they received it in the first instance, but they did not become richer. I think the problem you have, in all honesty, is that all of your best economists are working as traders. And what this means is...
Yeah, they're benefiting from the system, no matter if it goes...
What we have done is we have very effectively separated the group of economists who are really trying to understand what's happening from the group of economists who manage...
the money.
No, who manage our economy.
Okay, yeah.
These are the guys who manage the money.
Yeah.
The guys who manage the money, people like me, get paid a lot of money to understand what's happening. But the guys in government, the guys in media, the guys in academia, the guys in the central banks, they are not really being paid to understand what's happening.
No.
And what you end up with is just really kind of chronic low competence economic governance, because all of the best economists are just working for the rich. And if you think about it, this in itself...
So it should be flipped, actually.
I mean...
sort of with the brightest mind should be on the other side.
Let's be honest, right? If I'm a billionaire and I have the best paid 10,000 economists in the world are all traders, okay?
Yeah.
So let's say we're going to have a football game, and I have the best paid 10,000 footballers in the world. Okay, and you
Sounds
don't have,
like a fun game.
you
right?
don't have any of the best paid 10,000 footballers in the world.
Yeah.
Who is going to win that game? And this is
I have a lot of teams, right?
This is what is happening in the world economy, right? Which is that the rich have the best paid 10,000 economists in the world.
Yeah.
And the governments don't have any of those guys.
No. So
right?
who's going to lose? Yeah.
And of course, every now and again you'll get somebody who, for some reason, doesn't care about money. Like somebody doing what I'm doing, which financially doesn't make sense. And I've lost a lot of money doing it. But the truth is, they have the 10,000 best.
Still, yeah.
If you need, as an average member of society, you need your government to have control of some of the world's best economists. Otherwise, you're going to lose. And that's what we're seeing.
Yeah.
This is about power.
Yeah.